The history of the eruption of the La Soufriere volcano, there has not been an eruption that we have had to evacuate persons off island. And from the scientific information that we are seeing and from the history and the historical information that is available, we have not had to evacuate persons off island. And we certainly have the Grenadines too if we need to take persons off of mainland St. Vincent. So there's nothing that say that we are going to evacuate off island first and foremost. In terms of the vaccine, if you're living in the red and orange zones now and you know that you have to be evacuated, I would strongly recommend that you take the vaccine. The fact that you're going to mix with other populations, you're going to mix with people we don't know where the virus is, and getting into shelters, and so you're living in a communal environment to try and protect you a little bit more. We know it's not going to stop you from getting the COVID, but it can reduce the severity, of course, of the virus affecting you. So persons in the red and orange zone, I really want to make an appeal for you. You know you have to evacuate. I strongly recommend that you take the vaccine.
Okay, so just to emphasize that it's a strong recommendation that if you're living in these zones, you do take the COVID-19 vaccine. I want to bring in Julia and ask Julia, what is the Red Cross doing specifically in the various communities to support N.E.M.O's mobilization and work in general?
Hi, we are at the Red Cross. As I said, our volunteers are our main source of support and strength at the Red Cross. So in the communities, basically, we are doing a lot of early warning. Basically, all the information you would have just given with regards to letting persons know where you can get the message for when it is time for you to evacuate. How to pack a grab-and-go bag, how to prepare your family with regards to leaving safely where the evacuation routes, and as well ensuring that volunteers have all the information they need to support in the communities. This is how the Red Cross is actually working through the N.E.M.O to support an evacuation of the La Soufriere in the communities around La Soufriere in the red and orange zone. What we have also been doing was working with other agencies under the National Emergency Management System, such as the Ministry of Health. We would sit at their various preparation meetings to see what they need from the Red Cross and in terms of support and how we can help. Also with regards to social development agencies, we also are supporting in terms of psychosocial support and ensuring safe entry into shelters and the vulnerable movement of the vulnerable as well. So this is some of the ways we are actually supporting through the National Emergency Management.
Okay, so in the event that we have an explosive eruption, the Red Cross is basically just ready to spring into action.
Yes. In all likelihood, we anticipate that there will be a moderate amount of pandemonium. So as much, with regards to disasters, you can plan as much and as near perfect as you can. But when persons panic, we have already experienced in the past that most of what you would have prepared go out of the window. So as much as possible, we want to make sure our volunteers have that knowledge and strength to stick to their guns and see the evacuation of persons safely out of the red and orange zone and into the safe zones is completed. We ensure that they are encouraged to have all of their PPEs, vaccination. We're ensuring not only just PPEs for COVID, but for volcanic ash fall. Even such as today, we were packing some items such as goggles and things and ensuring that volunteers, we really don't know if this is going to happen over the weekend, next 2 weeks, next 3 weeks, 1 month, but we want to make sure that they're comfortable to respond. We always encourage that they ensure their families, first and foremost, is taken care of and prepared, and ensure that they have the necessary tools, are equipped with the tools to respond.
Okay. Professor Robertson, question for you. We have all this updated equipment, Soufriere's, you have been putting in equipment, monitoring equipment. How is it that the science then is not more exact and can't be more definite in predicting what is likely to happen?
Well, it's simply because what we're trying to do is extremely difficult, and there are lots of uncertainties. In other words, there are lots of things that we simply do not know. What we are trying to do, we're trying to see inside of the mass of rock that you have up there. And we have no way of directly probing inside of it what is happening. So we have to depend on instruments that we put on the surface, and then expect that the volcano would behave in particular ways which it has behaved in the past. You know, it's behaving in a similar way, or else it's behaving in ways that other volcanoes have behaved. And if you think of this volcano, it's been around for probably close to 1 million years, a little bit more than that. And we as human beings have been looking at it in a scientific way, in the way in which we're looking at it now, for over probably about 60 or 70 years. So this volcano has, and we've been studying it, its history, for a little bit longer than that. We've probably been studying it for the last 4,000 years. We know a little bit more about it for the last 4,000 years. So even if in that 4,000 years we had understood it in a certain way, we still only know a small part of it. It's like trying to figure out what kind of personality somebody have by investigating and talking to them for an hour while they have lived for a much longer time than that. So even with our best instruments, because we don't fully understand the system, and we can't really because we simply have not studied it enough, we don't know enough about volcanoes. Because of all those things, we cannot be positive when we look at, absolutely positive that is, when we look at certain signals that come out. So yes, we are fairly confident given the signals that we have that it will tell us something, but we always have to bear in mind that we're really only looking at a very small portion of this volcano's history, and we only understand a very limited amount of things about it. And therefore accept that, and in accepting that, realize that we cannot be perfect in our estimation of what it will do. So we've always said, and it's always said that volcanology is not an exact science. Because of the nature of what we try to do, we're trying to figure out what is happening deep beneath the surface of the earth without actually going there. And that's always going to be extremely difficult. And we have to be honest about it. So yes, we have lots of instruments. What if anything, the instruments would do, and our understanding of this eruption would do, and the more intense monitoring we have of it that is ongoing, what it will certainly do, it will help us to understand it better so that in the future, it will help those who have to deal with eruptions in the future. They will now have that knowledge that we have gained to build upon. And I think as we move forward, we've been at a better stage where we would give perhaps more accurate and better estimates of what could happen. And we all build on our experience in the past. That's what we're constantly doing. So yes, we would love to be able to tell you exactly when it is. But if you think of it in the context of other things, even the meteorological services who have been doing this for much longer than us and have much better models of the newer things, even they have it slightly, not exactly correct all the time. So, it's perhaps, I would hope that it would inspire some Vincentians to get involved in the business so that they could build upon the knowledge that we have. That, at some point in the future, we might be in a better stage to say exactly what would happen. But that said, I'd leave you with one last thing. That said, I think we know enough about it now to tell you that it's likely to do something nasty at some point. And therefore, we need to put our house in order. And it really is up to us to do that. And I think you've had a couple of months of seeing what it could do to put your house in order. So I'm appealing to you to do precisely that.
Okay. There were reports of interference with equipment during the week. Were they ever confirmed?
No, they're okay. No one interfered. They wanted fancy. We believe that the strong winds that we had over the last few weeks, that actually broke one of the piece of support for the antenna, but they were not interfered with. We did a check yesterday, and everything is fine. I think those stations are streaming back now into Belmont, Dr. Robertson, so it seems to be okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, and I just say that I'm glad that our Vincentian brethren and sistren have responded quite responsibly with the lots of equipment, expensive equipment we've put out there. Thus far, we have not had any incidents of vandalism, and thus far they've left it alone. And I'd appeal to them to keep doing that. And if as much as they can keep on doing that, we'll keep on trying to make sure we have a close eye and give you as much information as we can about what's happening.
We'll take a third break and come back in just a moment.
The Super 6 jackpot for Tuesday, April 6th is $240,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6, a bigger jackpot game.
On Tuesday, April 6th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $205,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $205,000.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, St. Vincent and the Grenadines' economy to grow by 0.2% in 2021, according to the World Bank. Trust the science and the authorities, says Prime Minister Gonsalves. And Taiwan improving fruits and vegetable production technology in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And in sports, Vincy Heat rebounded last evening to beat the British Virgin Islands in Group C of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers.
We'll have these stories and more at 7 p.m. this evening on the VC3 News Update.
Welcome back. There are a couple of questions. First one is from someone who wants to know, what about evacuation for Spring Village on the leeward side? I see no way for them to go.
Spring Village is actually in the yellow zone. So it's not one of the communities that will be at the first, if needed, to evacuate. The communities that must evacuate are the red persons in the red zone. In this particular scenario that we have decided since the effusive eruption, because the vent is on the western side of the dome of the crater, which overlooks like Chateaubriand, Fitzhugh's area. Those communities that are in the green zone, those will be evacuated for Chateaubriand, Fitzhugh's, and those in the red zone. Then it moves down to the orange zone. That's the sequence. So the Spring Village is actually in the yellow zone. It's not in the orange or the red zone, and will only be evacuated if an evacuation order is given for that particular community. It means then that if the situation develops that we think that those communities have to be evacuated, they will do so. But they are not in the two zones that are the ones that we focus on for evacuation first.
Okay. Farmers who are concerned about their livestock, what's in place so that they can feel reassured?
I don't want to preempt the Ministry of Agriculture, but the Ministry of Agriculture has been working and have their plans have been communicating to farmers, and I know they're planning on doing a short exercise soon. The Ministry of Agriculture have already determined pastures that people can actually take their animals to, encouraging persons to tag their animals prior. So I would encourage those persons to contact the extension officers for those areas, because I know the Ministry of Agriculture, we have been working with them in part of their plan development. So they have areas that have assigned for movement of animals, movement of the ministry's animals also, because they do have some hybrid animals, and the movement of animals from those for farmers who have their animals. So you can contact the respective extension officers.
Is there a plan for Kingstown if there is an explosive eruption during work hours? Without a plan, the situation can be confusing. There will be panic for sure.
I don't always agree with the panic. I think if we look at the history of how Vincentians have responded to La Soufriere, we have always been responsible in terms of our action. So if you're in Kingstown, I think it goes back to an individual planning. We need to take that into consideration. If I am working in Kingstown, for example, and I'm from Fancy, something happens, what individual plan would I have had in place? And we need to start thinking this particular explosive eruption is not going to affect only the red and orange zone, all of us, as a callers, the persons that affected those in Kingstown. So the plan must be able to cater for all of the population. If you're in Kingstown, you live in Kingstown, we have to be prepared to receive persons from those zones. We ourselves have to prepare to store up water, because the water supply will be disrupted. Once there's an explosive eruption, there will be a disruption in the water supply, because CWS have to safeguard the equipment. So we have to have those individual plans too. So I don't always agree with the panic, but we ourselves have to put things in place for ourselves, just as how we prepare for any emergency. I really don't think people will be anxious, yes. Persons who have families living in those zones, they definitely want to go and get them. So those are the controls that have to be put in place once the police are in place, in terms of controlling the movement of persons in and out of the red and the orange zones, to restrict the traffic and to avoid any incidents that we may have. So we all have to plan no matter which zone we're in.
Okay, and someone is asking, how would you enforce such protocols, the COVID protocols, of course, in a panic situation? This is an impossibility. The solution is to be vaccinated to minimize spread.
I think that's a comment. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. The impending eruption of La Soufriere Volcano has had Grenada and St. Lucia to put systems in place to accept evacuees. Many persons in the red zone have stated their opposition to being vaccinated. This could result in a super spreader. Can the government of SVG implement certain measures as granted under the Constitution of SVG, which speaks to protecting the population in face of infectious diseases such as COVID-19?
The government certainly can. I think that's above my head now. We want to really encourage, but as I said, encourage persons to vaccinate. But under the Public Health Act, the government can actually make certain things, put certain things in place to ensure that people get vaccinated. I don't think, that's for us to discuss now, but it can happen.
Okay, so it can actually be...
It can happen.
Okay. Should we be thinking about the elderly and bedridden persons to be evacuated ahead of a major eruption?
And I would ask that person, when do we make that decision? Because it's very difficult, given the way volcanoes behave, to make that decision to move those persons. If an individual family want to do that, I will encourage them to do it. But as a state now, how long are we going to move that person for if we do not have an explosive eruption for 5 months, 6 months, 3 weeks? So there's a lot of logistics involved in that. So what it does now, we ask families to, if you can make those individual arrangements yourself now, you can do that. But for the state, we would not be moving those persons too far ahead until we have that indication from the scientists that something is happening.
Somebody wants to know what's in place if the eruption causes a tsunami.
I'll let Richie speak about that, because it's unlikely that we're going to have a tsunami.
So, Professor?
Yes. The volcanoes, first of all, volcanoes, when they erupt, one of the ways in which tsunamis are formed are through volcanic activity. There are two ways. One is by eruption of a submarine volcano, An explosive eruption of a submarine volcano can push the water away and therefore be the source of a tsunami being generated. Another way is when you have a large amount of material collapsing into the sea from a volcano that's above the ground, in like an island or the flank of a large landmass. If it suddenly falls into the sea, it could generate a tsunami. So in those two cases, a volcano can do that. In this case, in the case of Soufriere, one of the ways is if you had a large-scale flank collapse. In other words, a large part of Soufriere fell into the sea. We have no indication there's anything that's going to happen right now from what's happening. It's something that, in the context of what Soufriere has done in the past, you have had times in the past where a little piece of because of the shaking of the mountain when it's erupting. For example, in 1902, a little part of the coastline in the Richmond area fell away, but it was a small part and it didn't really generate a wave. For you to have a tsunami that could cause, first of all, to have a tsunami, you have to have a large part falling off. For you to have one that's big enough to cause any harm, you have to have a big piece falling off. That isn't in the realm of possibility, like in the realm of, of like a meteor hitting the earth or something like that. That's something that can happen. But so far, what we're seeing, what this volcano is doing, it doesn't look like something that's about to happen. But, just in case, we have always been putting in place measures in the mountain to try to monitor for all kinds of possibilities. And as people would remember that we put a reflector on the southwest flank of the crater wall. We put a mirror essentially on the mountain, and we hit a beam of light to it, and we measure the distance of that beam of light from the reflector to the point in the ground. And we had the Land and Surveys Department measuring that for the last couple of months. And that measurement hasn't shown any change. Why we put that? Because we wanted to see if the side of the mountain there, where the dome is pressing on, and is most likely to press on, if it showed any signs of failure. And it hasn't. And that's why I can say, fairly confidently that there's no signs now that there's any flank collapse about to happen or imminent at Soufriere, and therefore the chances of tsunami being generated that would cause harm, we think is very low. And therefore, something that we at this point, there are other things that we should be worried about rather than the possibility of tsunami that would cause any harm from La Soufriere eruption.
Okay, and as we wind down, okay, I see a couple of quick questions, but I would want you, Professor Robertson, to talk about the myth of, we are coming up on that Easter weekend holiday, and we want to talk a little bit about that myth about Soufriere might do another number on us this Easter weekend. So we'll end with that, but somebody's asking, what about Kick-Up Jenny? I think it is. Isn't it connected to the volcano on mainland? What if that triggers off? Can that cause a tsunami? I think you could respond to that. You probably did already.
No, Kick-Up Jenny is not connected, and we've mentioned that multiple times. So the fact that Soufriere is erupting is not going to make or stop Kick-Up Jenny from erupting. It operates independently.
Can the entire nation be sensitized beforehand as to the movement of traffic or restrictions that will come into place to avoid persons from safe areas wanting to move into the red zone to get family members and creating traffic issues?
Certainly, we will be stepping that. That's part of our plan, and we'll be stepping that up over the next week or so. So that we'll be communicating on a regular basis with the general public.
Okay, great. And Professor, that myth?
Right. Okay. Well, it's not a myth. I think people find all kinds of patterns and try to find all kinds of patterns, and I've seen people. I've seen recent things where people have looked at the dates that the eruptions have happened in the historic past, and they've seen that it's erupted in particular times of the year and wonder if it would erupt around that same time. And that's where that April 13th story comes from. I would to counter that, I will say you have to look at how long this volcano has been around. Remember, I was telling you it's close to a million, probably a little bit over a million years. And when you start making comparison over the last, 2,000 years, it's like trying again to look at what somebody did in the last 2 years of their life, and based on what they did in the last 2 years of their life, figure out what they did, what kind of person they are while they have lived 60 years. You met somebody, you met them, you only saw them for one day, and you figure out from that one day, well, what they did for the entire lives. That's what we're trying to do when we do that. So I will say that the fact that the volcano might have in historical times, it erupted in a particular time of the year, does not mean that it will or that it wouldn't erupt at around the same time. There is no scientific reasons to say that this is the time of the year that it should erupt or it should not erupt. And if it does, well, it does, because it's time to erupt. It doesn't have anything to do with the date. Now, I could say that forever and people will still believe what they believe. But I bear with the science. And science suggests to me that we don't understand the volcano enough to know exactly when it will erupt and whether it erupts earlier or later on in the year. And therefore, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about what particular date we have now, tomorrow, or the next day, or the next week.
Well, that's our program for today. A perfect note on which to end, I think. Take this opportunity to thank Professor Robertson as usual. Thank you to Julia Simmons, and of course, thank you, Michelle, for being in the studio with me yet again. We'll continue to keep our eye on La Soufriere and inform you and keep you aware of what changes occur and when they do. In the meantime, here's to wishing you a blessed Easter. Good evening.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Tuesday, April 6th is $240,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
On Tuesday, April 6th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $205,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $205,000.
This evening on the VC3 News Update, St. Vincent and the Grenadines' economy to grow by 0.2% in 2021, according to the World Bank. Trust the science and the authorities, says Prime Minister Gonsalves. And Taiwan improving fruit and vegetable production technology in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
And in sports, Vinci Heat rebounded last evening to beat the British Virgin Islands in Group C of the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers.
We'll have these stories and more at 7 p.m. this evening on the VC3 News Update.